Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the book launch of San Bernardino Singing. So if you're new to the book, it's an anthology project that was put on by Nakia Cheney, who was the Inlandia Literary Laureate of 2016 through 2018. She made sure that it involved art, poetry, and prose from locals within the Inland Empire and San Bernardino. It was published by Inlandia Books, which is the publisher of Inlandia Institute, which is the literary nonprofit organization putting on this event. My name is Christina Guillen. I'm the programs coordinator for Inlandia. And let's go ahead and see who today's guests are. James Luna is here. We have Cindy Rinne and Juanita Mantz. So we're gonna go ahead and go around and have everyone introduce themselves, starting with James. So let's have James go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and about your poem that's in the book.
All right, hi. My name is James Luna. I grew up in San Bernardino. My parents grew up in San Bernardino. My mom grew up in Colton. So lived there until I moved to Riverside after becoming a teacher here. I've been a teacher here in Riverside now. I got my PIN last week, 35 years. My contribution to the anthology is called The Santa Fe Whistle, which is, if you live in San Bernardino, is a constant companion and a timepiece, and that's the way my poem is written, as a the whistle is part of the time of the poem. I also write children's books that are published through Piñata Press in Houston.
Very cool. Thank you for being here, James.
My pleasure.
Let's turn to Cindy Rinne. Cindy, how are you doing today?
Hi, great. Happy to be here. So I'm Cindy Rinne, and I've lived in San Bernardino since 1982. My husband and I moved here because he got a tenure track position at Cal State San Bernardino College at that time. And he taught 32 years, almost as many as James. But we raised our family here, and I've lived here longer than anywhere else in my life, so it's become home. And I have poetry and art in the anthology. My poem is called 3 Drops Balanced on an Elm Leaf, a Flame-Singed Tip, and the artwork is called And the Leaves Fall and First Love.
Great. We look forward to hearing more about your artwork and your poem.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Juanita Mantz. Juanita, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Juanita Mantz. I live in unincorporated San Bernardino. I grew up in Ontario in the 1970s and the 1980s. I work as a deputy public defender in Riverside, California. And my memoir that I just finished is about growing up in the Inland Empire as a punk rock girl in the 70s and 80s. My poem in Singing is a poem called An Inland Empire Girl. It was written the day after the Inland Regional Center shooting, which is an agency I work hand in hand with because I represent the intellectually disabled population. And I also had a friend that was supposed to be working that day. Thankfully she wasn't, but that hit really close to home. So I wrote my poem about coming home to San Bernardino after years of working in Texas, San Francisco, Los Angeles as a lawyer, coming home to my community and being a public defender and having this happen. So it's really a poem about grief.
Well, thank you for writing it and for sharing it with us today. We'll get back to that in just a little bit. So turning back to James Luna, I think we'll start with your poem, and you talked about the Santa Fe Whistle, which we talked about that yesterday in our other event with Adam. So I was wondering, what does the whistle mean to you? And you talked about it in your childhood and the cartoons. So maybe you can give us a little more on that.
Well, the whistle was kind of like a poor man's version of Big Ben. We knew what time it was during the day based on when the whistle was blowing. And we'd be on the playground, we'd hear the 10 o'clock whistle. The poem refers to the 3 o'clock whistle because when I was a kid, 3 o'clock was when the cartoons started. You had cartoons from 3 to 5 back then, no 24-hour cartoon channels. So that was like the special time. We should have been home by 3 o'clock. If you weren't home by the 3 o'clock whistle, you messed up because you were going to miss Yogi Bear or whatever was going to be on. That whistle was just literally like a timepiece to us. In the poem, the 3 o'clock also is the time of the Good Friday services, where they have the reenactment of the Via Crucis, the crucifixion that used to happen every Good Friday at Our Lady of Guadalupe, where we went to church. And my mom would take off a half day. She was a teacher, and she would take off the last half day of Good Friday to go and cook and prepare the meal for that. So all these things of the whistle being the timepiece and the church and all the moments of my childhood just kind of came together in that poem. And it just, to me, it was, and we grew up a block and a half from the tracks. So the trains and the time and TV, all those kind of things just were part of what went into the poem.
Mm. And speaking of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the church, you know, I noticed a number of the poems within the book talk about religion or faith or community or some symbol of hope, you know, and I was curious because that one seemed like a very elaborate actual reenactment of the last Friday. So I was curious, how did the community respond to or gather there? How did it unite people?
Well, it was like more or less people would get there about noon, mill around or get ready for the reenactment, and people knew weeks ahead of time if they were going to be the centurion, if they were going to be Pontius Pilate, if they were going to be even the weeping women that greeted Jesus, or Simon who carried the cross. Everybody had their parts. I never played a part. I was way too shy for that. But it was a real community event, and it really was just everyday people. It was, like I said, it was like the custodian and the bus driver, whoever was doing their part were just everyday people just reenacting this around the parking lot. So they'd start outside the parking lot and walk all the way through, doing each step of the Stations of the Cross. And meanwhile, my mom and a lot of her friends were cooking, because you don't eat on Good Friday until afternoon. So they'd cook all this stuff and have a little feast when it was all over.
Oh, wow. That's interesting, because I've seen things like that, like mainly in other countries, mainly in Mexico, actually. Mm-hmm. And so was that something that was brought over as a cultural
oh yeah, most definitely. Yes. It was a holdover, I guess, you know, from Mexico. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And do you know if they still do that today?
Some churches do, like here in Riverside, there's an Our Lady of Guadalupe shrine, and they still do the reenactment. So I haven't been to the church in San Bernardino in years, but I would be interested to see if they still do it. Because,
right.
You know, just to see how much of it is the same, how much of it is different.
Definitely. You know, and the way that you ended the poem about that the boy couldn't eat until the Savior had died, and I started to wonder, were the cartoons like food for the boy?
That was kind of like his entertainment. It was also kind of a play on words of communion, because in Catholicism, you eat the body of Christ, and you don't do that until after he's died. So it's a play on communion. It's a play on him finally getting to watch the TV and him literally getting to eat. Little kids don't have to fast, but I would. As a kid, I would try not to eat and see if I could do what the adults did up until the afternoon. Wasn't always successful, but yeah.
Very cool. Is there anything else you'd like to say about your poem, or, you know, San Bernardino or the anthology? Any other?
Oh, I just love the richest of the anthology. I mean, so many different points of view, so many different takes on San Bernardino, so many different moments in time. Like some are very contemporary, and some are like looking back at things that aren't there anymore. Chinatown, the Brandon Eye, and all that kind of stuff. It was just so much fun to read it. It was like time traveling. It was just really fun to get into the whole. I don't want to, the whole art that's there, you know, the whole history, the people that are there. It makes it not a place, but a group of people. It humanized just the name of the city. It was really great anthology. It was really fun. I'm really proud to be part of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like I keep learning every time I read something new,
Mhm.
which brings me to Cindy's poems. If we can go to Cindy Rinne, because I didn't know about Chinatown in San Bernardino either. And so, how did you find out about this, or were you also surprised when you learned?
I don't remember how I found it, but I do like to research, and I was very surprised. I have I have lived in Taiwan and I've loved Asian culture since a child, and so this discovery really made me happy, but kind of sad that it's not as evident anymore. But the discovery was quite surprising. I mean, I've lived here a long time. People do talk about history and different things, and I'd never heard of this before.
Mm-hmm. Neither had I. And I was doing some research that it was actually the first Chinatown in the Inland Empire. I mean, a few years before the Riverside one. So that was even
Yes.
more surprising. So, and you mentioned in your poem about the Kuan Yin statue and that is still there, you know, going again with the theme of religion, or like we talked with Ruth Nolan's poem about the Virgin Mary statue. There's all these little symbols that are strewn throughout the city that remain and I guess are the backbone, the strength of the people. So I was wondering, can you still visit that statue, and where would that be?
I don't think it's in a like public place.
It's not.
It's been a while since I researched this, but I think it's you know, like a private group. But it's still at that time, having this statue here, it was a place of pilgrimage, and they were very surprised how far people would come to, you know, visit this temple in Kuan Yin, because they're like, wow, you know, we're in San Bernardino, we've got this, but people would, you know, go far, and it was transportation would have been more difficult in 1878. So it really was a pilgrimage to come and see her. Uh, so an important part of the poem for me now, looking back at it, is that at first the Chinese were welcomed here, and then they were forced to move outside of the city because they were considered taking jobs away from the quote Americans. And so I feel like a lot of that is happening again, even though I wrote this poem several years ago. Sadly, situation still exists. But they created their own place. And, you know, of course, there's still restaurants and grocery stores. And I go to a Korean grocery store in Waterman, and it's fabulous. I mean, so there's pockets, of course, still here. It's just not, this was, you know, a big community.
Right. It's definitely something to keep your eye out for if you're ever down there looking for the little. I know if you go to the river bottom here, right behind Mount Rubidoux, you can still find small pieces of china, like in the river. So the blue around. So yeah, it is definitely a part of the Inland Empire culture. Maybe you can talk about the title of your poem, Three Drops Balanced on an Elm Leaf, a Flame-Singed Tint.
I knew you were going to ask that. So
Well, good.
my work is very nature-based, inspired. So I'm seeing in this title a balance between water and fire, because there was a fire, and then I experienced a fire with my home years later. So the flame-singed tip is a tree that is in the foothills from my fire, and there's still trees growing around it that survived, but it didn't, but it's there, and the birds still land on it, large birds on the tip of this little tree. And for years I could smell the ash in the trees in the foothills. And so just the balance, trying to bring balance. And I'm still here, we stayed. So
Very nice. How do you combine your artwork? You do fiber art, which is featured in the book as well, a couple of images. Do you combine your writing with the artwork? Are they separate?
they've become combined. So I've done my fiber art over 30 years. Professionally, the poetry came later. I wrote poems all my life, but professionally it was much later on. And so they were, in my mind, they were quite separate, but then they started kind of talking to each other. So poems appear on the art. The art inspired one of my books. So, and now I'm fortunate to be able to put the art in full color in some of the books because color printing is affordable. So that's been wonderful. Years ago, that wouldn't have happened. So that's been great to have that experience. So they do talk back and forth. And they're also, like, maybe if I'm doing a lot of writing, then I can stop and let that percolate and go and stitch, and the other way around. So it's kind of nice to have those spaces, but they're both creative spaces. And I have two wonderful communities to be involved with doing two different things like this.
That's very true. Do you have the images with you?
Well, I have the work. I hadn't figured out yet how to do share screen, but let's see if this will work okay. Yeah. So this is,
Wow.
and the leaves fall. And there's a photo negative in here. I know my daughter's watching, and that's from her. She's a photographer. So I like to mix materials. If I can stitch through it, it will usually appear on a work somewhere. I've got acrylic painting up here because I was a professional watercolorist and acrylic artist. So I like to gather fabrics from around the world. So that shows up in my work. And the other piece is called First Love. So this one has text on it that you can see. And the flowers, a little bit dimensional. So these are quilted, and they're one of a kind. And so I've done some drawing on here. And sometimes I'll even do watercolor. I found fabric paints that behave like watercolors, and tested lots of fabrics and found which ones would work. So I still paint sometimes.
And you hand stitch that?
No.
Okay.
I do machine quilting. I discovered years ago that you could draw with the sewing machine. And I thought, well, I already know how to draw with a pencil. I can do this. And so it's free motion, free form. If you sneeze, you're in trouble because it just goes. But took about 5 years to get even stitches. But I just draw I don't draw it out first. I just draw with the machine. So someone else can't do it for me because I don't know ahead of time, what I want to do.
Right.
So
part of the process.
It's just combining the drawing skills.
And also, what a treat for everyone that we get to be in your studio.
Yes.
That's your work, right?
Yeah, new work, getting ready for shows next week. So it's really been nice to be able to have virtual art openings, art shows, and virtual poetry, and it helps feel a little better. I am a people person, and so this being alone thing is a little harder maybe than for some others, but this helps a lot.
Do you want to tell us where your show is in case anyone's interested to?
Oh, I can actually. So these pieces with the red, this side, are going to La Matadora Gallery in Joshua Tree. I think the opening is the second Saturday in June. That's their art walk. And they're kind of playing it by ear to see if it'll be virtual or some in person, but they'll have appointments so you can visit. So downtown Joshua Tree.
Very nice. Thank you
you
for joining us from your studio. Really nice to hear about your work. And I think Juanita Mantz, I will talk to you next about your poem, I Am an Inland Empire Girl. I thought that your poem had such a strong flavor to it. It has a very strong feminine connection to the Inland Empire, but also to San Bernardino. And I guess my question was about how you left and then you came back and you found the love for yourself, the love for your home, your family. And I was curious as to what you found different from before and after.
Everything changed, right? In the 70s, Ontario was vineyards, it was Pup and Taco back then, and a Pizza Hut, Yum Yum Donuts, and not much else. And I never thought I would come back. When I escaped to UC Riverside, that was a huge thing for me. And then when I went to USC for law school, I was terrified. And then going to Texas, I never thought I would come home. I wanted to escape this small Inland Empire neighborhood. I dropped out of high school and took my GED. So I had a lot of trauma that I was dealing with from my high school experience. So I always thought I would live in New York or San Francisco. And then when I came home and my dad died, I just left everything. And I jumped on a plane. I came home from San Francisco and I never left since. And that was 16 years ago at this point. No, 14 years ago at this point. Yeah, 14. Everything changed. And if you had told me when I was graduating from law school that I would live in unincorporated San Bernardino, maybe 15 minutes from where I grew up, I would not have believed you. I just wouldn't have believed it. I would say I would never come home. But I was always yearning for my home. I thought I wanted to leave, but I grew up in Texas in some ways. I lived there by myself for 3 years, no family. And I had to learn to go out to eat alone. I had to learn to go to the theater alone. And I think just having that time to really figure out who I was when I came home and left corporate law practice and became a public defender, I knew I would never leave now. I'll never leave. I love it. I love it. And it's everything I write about is steeped in place. And I just hear my dad here who's passed, and I hear everything here. It's like I never left, but I was gone for a very long time. And I didn't really see my family for many years. So I think I healed, and I like who I am now.
Mm. Yeah. So what do you think that San Bernardino has that LA, San Francisco, these other cities that you visited can't quite compare, that you wanted to come back? Or maybe you already mentioned some of it.
It's just the community. It's such a beautiful place. The mountain vistas, the little restaurants that have been there forever. Just the panorama of San Bernardino is beautiful. We're close to the mountains. We're close to the beach. We're close to LA. I hated living in LA. I hated it. I do not like the big city. Right now I'm in Hesperia, California, in a place called Oak Hills at my mother-in-law's house. And I love it here too. This reminds me of Ontario when I was little. So I love San Bernardino County. It's just one of the biggest counties there is in California. And we work so much with Riverside that the Inland Empire is really what I call home. That intersection of San Bernardino and Riverside County, where Ontario is somewhat of an apex of that. So my sister Annette, my little sister Anne, who I write about as well, she lives in Covina. She's moving to Ontario 3 miles from where we grew up. So you always come home, either literally or figuratively.
That's very beautiful. What is it like to be an Inland Empire girl?
It has such a bad reputation for many people. Most of the public defenders in Riverside live in Orange County. And when I say how much I love my hometown, you live in San Bernardino? Yeah, I do. I love it. I love it. And Liz Gonzalez, who I'm very good friends with, who's also in the anthology, and Cassandra Lopez, we have such a community of Latina writers in San Bernardino. It's amazing, who are either from San Bernardino and live in LA or are still here in San Bernardino writing about our city and trying to uplift this narrative. We are not just a place where shootings happen. We're a place where the first McDonald's was built. We're a place where we have colors of, and the diversity. And I don't really like the word diversity, but it's just all colors, all shapes, all sizes, and we all get along here for the most part. And my community that I live in unincorporated San Bernardino is very 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of racially, 1/4 Black, white, Mexican, Asian, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love it. And a lot of people probably wouldn't want to live where I live because they'd be like, I don't want to be in unincorporated San Bernardino. I want to be in Rancho Cucamonga. No, I love San Bernardino. I love it. And I will always have that pride. I was not born in California. I was born in Great Falls, Montana. but I moved to Montclair, California when I was 1, and then to Ontario when I was 4. So I consider myself a native.
Yes, you definitely have some passion about this place. I'm so glad that you decided to contribute to the anthology and to share that and to show a side of San Bernardino that some people may not know. Do you have any other comments about the anthology or about your hometown?
It's just such a beautiful testament that we're all witnessing in this anthology. And I think it'll live on forever. And that's what's the beautiful thing about writing. I'm mostly a prose, I write memoir, but just writing in generally as an art is that we're memorializing who we are, where we came from, or capturing a place. And it's so important because especially in these times, you can take that as a comfort.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for
Thank
all
you.
your comments and your poetry. We have a video to show that will spotlight some of the writers from the anthology. Here it is.
Hey, I'm Gail Brandeis, and I'm going to be reading to you from my short story, The Wash. Let's get married, Mason said, as he was driving us down Baseline to Goldman's Medical Supply. I mean it, Shelby. Keep your eye on the road, I told him. He was looking right at my face. No, really, Shelby, I mean it. What do you say we get married? Mason, you're not even my boyfriend. I slurped up the last of my white cherry icy. That's okay, said Mason. There was a funny shine in his eyes. People do it all the time. We like each other, right? Of course we do, Mason, I said. But by then we had pulled up in front of Goldman's, and I squeezed one last drop through the red straw with the little spoon at the end, and we had other things to think about. Mason needed surgical tubing. He and some friends were going to play war games out in the wash the next day. Surgical tubing made the best slingshots for water balloons. The wash is up by the foot of the San Bernardino Mountains. It's probably a dry riverbed full of rocks, all the water washed away. It would be a rock lover's dream, except all the rocks look the same, white. Maybe they look different to rock lovers. The smell at Goldman's gives me the creeps. It's like vinegar and old people and the tape on the bottom of maxi pads all mixed together. While Mason tested out surgical tubing, what stretches farther, what springs back faster, I looked around. Usually when I go to a store, I can find at least one thing I'd be happy to bring home, but not here. No bedpans or oxygen machines for me, thank you. Goldman's has a whole section of prosthetics. Fake arms, eyes, breasts, feet. It must feel weird to have a glass eye in your head, like a permanent brain freeze. I guess I wouldn't mind slipping some fake boobs into my bra, but that would be a fine how do you do for any guy I might pick up. Take off my shirt and my boobs fall out? I don't think so. Back in the truck, I felt kind of strange. I took some of the 100 feet of tubing out of the bag and started yanking on it. It felt good to pull it with both hands, to feel the resistance in between. All those body parts must have got to me. I felt like I was made out of something very flimsy. I looked over at Mason and said, okay, Mason, I'll marry you. Thanks.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Keenan Norris. I'm one of the contributing authors to San Bernardino Singing, the first literary anthology, first and only literary anthology based completely on San Bernardino-based literature. I published a novel a few years ago, also through Heyday Books, called Brother and the Dancer, that is set in this area of San Bernardino, in and around it. And my piece in San Bernardino Singing is drawn from that book, and I'm going to read part of that. After finally figuring out that Erica no longer wanted him. Ricky didn't come around anymore. Instead, he sent the girls he slept with to find Erica at school, at the store, wherever, whenever, so that they could tell her about how lucky they were and how dumb a bitch she was. Erica didn't take any of this seriously. She knew she wasn't dumb and she could care less about being a bitch, as long as she wasn't the weak kind. She plain and simple didn't take the girls as personally as she knew Rick was hoping that she would. Unlike his quotations and his weird suit, this was a very predictable move on his part. He was male. Young as she was, Erica already knew that the other half of humanity had their egos wrapped around their dicks. If you denied them sexually and at the level of their ego, it would let you know about it. But these females were Rick's way of moving on. She was good with that, just so long as he moved on. He had some truly annoying, spiteful bitches hauling his water for him, but she was good with that too. Girls were nothing to her. All she wanted was to be left to herself. She was best by herself. It was in fall of her senior year in high school that she saw the blue dancer's dress again. It had been months since any of Ricky's girls had approached her. Then one day, walking home from step practice, Erica saw the pretty little dress again. There were a million little blue dresses in the world, but somehow she just knew that the one the girl walking up Delrose Avenue was wearing was the exact same one that Ricky had bought for her and that she had left at his place when she broke up with him. The girl inside the dress had a red light, traffic stopping figure. She overflowed and fell out of the dress in front of and even more in back. Her butt was a convex table, the dress a tablecloth barely covering her. She didn't have the dancer's body that the dress seemed meant for, but she had a shapeliness that surpassed the dress. Erica noticed the cars along Del Rosa slowing as they passed the girl and felt suddenly, totally, physically inadequate. It had to do with the dress, with the girl, with the fact that Erica was dressed in sweatpants and a sweat-soaked top, and her unmade hair was a wet mess, and she smelled like a man, and she was walking alone. Ricky's previous females had been average at best. They were the kind of desperate girls who felt they had nothing but sex to offer. The first one was his G Street jump-off. The girl confronted Erica outside the high school. She was about 6 feet tall in her heels, so when she walked up to Erica, she literally talked down to her. The spiteful part was that she straight out told Erica how even before Erica was out of the picture, she and Ricky liked to have sex in the bed Erica shared with her man. Then she asked Erica if she wanted in on a threesome. The second girl stepped to Erica in the grocery store one day. She was light-skinned, probably mixed with white or Latina, and small like Erica. She had a mouth on her too, talking about Ricky's size and calling Erica all kinds of bitches and heifers. They were both small, but Erica was strong and she knew it. Knew she could yank the girl by her long hair and slam her into the wine rack if she made her angry enough. When she could maim her so easy, it was hard to feel anything but superior. The third female, Erica barely remembered, except that the woman was a little bit older than the others, wore a weave, had what looked like a wedding ring on her finger. She spoke softly, but said most of the same messed up things. Erica felt sorry for her. Erica had as little respect for those females as Ricky did for them. But this girl coming up the street was a little different. More unself-conscious than the others, she walked like someone who wasn't trying to convince herself that the brother she had just slept with still wanted her. Erica was the nervous one now. She played her hands through her sweat-drenched hair, tried to make it magically sit up or lie down or fly sideways or anything half respectable. But as usual, it was impossible to make wet hair be anything respectable. As they neared each other, the girl's eyes narrowed on Erica. She swung her purse in a full looping circle. Erica could tell something was about to happen. She nodded at the girl. The girl did not nod back. Erica kept her eyes on the little purse. I like them bangs, the girl offered. And that top too. Gotta give me one of them right there. The insults came off her mouth sweet as syrup. Erica stopped in the middle of Del Rosa. The girl stopped too. Erica waited for something to come to mind, something that she could say in return, but nothing came. Yeah, the girl in the blue dress went on. You don't say much, do you? Making things all awkward. Is that a strategy or something? Right then, Erica regretted not having made friends with the younger girls in the step squad who had replaced her graduated friends, Quincia and Lindsay. Now she walked home alone from practice. I just finished step practice, she finally managed. I'm tired. She still had her eyes on the purse. I've been teen out in Moreno Valley. I was born and raised in this filthy old town, but I got my ass to Moreno Valley. Ain't nothing worthwhile out here. Just my dude, he stay out here. And family. But they all moving down my way, down to Mobile.
So just as a reminder, all of the videos that you see that the writers have put together for the anthology are available to be seen again on the Inlandia YouTube channel. So I just want to quickly close out with a couple questions that we had from the audience. One was for James that I had forgotten to mention about your video that you had put together. You used some cartoon imagery or maybe you, I don't know if it was you. The question was who put that together? So maybe you can answer that.
I haven't seen that video. I made a short video of the poem, and in that one I used pictures that I took in San Bernardino of the Santa Fe whistle and things like that. But I did put some cartoon images too. It was just, to me, it was just kind of a visual thing of like the poem and bringing it more to life. Cartoon images, but really like focusing on where the poem took place, the church and the Santa Fe whistle and things like that. That to me was the best way for me to communicate the poem visually.
Visually, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And my other question is for Juanita. This is from Stephanie Hammer. She says that, Juanita, you write with so much passion about the Inland Empire, and I'm wondering about what advice you would give to writers who would like to write about their hometowns. How should we start? Thank you.
That's a great question. The very first story I wrote was my dad's eulogy. I hadn't written in years. I had written some poetry, but not stories. And I started with this image of the movie theater, the drive-in in Pomona, Montclair, California, that our dad used to take us to every weekend. So I just started with that image and it went from there. So I think if you just pick one experience or one place or one image and just try to free write about it, it just comes out like water. That first story, that first eulogy from my dad came out in like 15 minutes. Mm. So I think, and I've never really edited the story. It came out as it was published. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that advice and very well said. So thank you to all of our presenters for joining us today. It was a good talk. We had James Luna, Cindy Rinne, and Juanita Mantz. So make sure to check out all of their work and the work of the others in the anthology, which is available at Amazon, at Celador Books, and at Barnes & Noble. We'll still be here tomorrow, same time, but we will have, it will be our final culminating event. We'll have Nakia Cheney, Irene Monica Sanchez, Erica Ayon, and Julie Sophia Pagel. Just to make sure if there's any other questions. Just a comment from Frances was that she loves the images. Love the images of love and loss and coming home to San Bernardino. Thank you all. Oh, and then do we have even more people joining us tomorrow? Is that what this, okay. We also have Ruth Nolan, Liz Gonzalez, Tristan Acker, Carlos Cortez, and Dinaz Coach Builder. So be sure to join us for all of these wonderful authors, and we'll have just a final conversation about the book and celebrating its arrival. So thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow, okay? And take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.